The word of the week for the sermon for me that you'll see throughout this is graininess. In true philosophical fashion, I like to make up words. So, what might it mean for us to think of ourselves as a grain of wheat meant to give up what we are to make life possible for others? That was the question that I think this gospel reading brings up for me, is the bittersweet reality of the need for a grain of wheat to fall to the ground and die in order to become another set of wheat. Not a very comfortable metaphor if you think about it in a literal sense. However, it occurred to me that this is the paradox. The nature of being a grain is to let go of graininess to ensure more graininess. Let me just say that again. The nature of being a grain of wheat is to let go of that graininess to ensure more graininess. So, letting go of the very thing that is the nature of the thing is how you get the thing. Talk about thingness. It reminds me of another passage from more authentic Paul. He talks about dying to death so that life may live. So, life as a grain. So, what is neat about a grain of wheat is that even if it doesn't fall to the ground, die, and become more wheat, it's still doing its thing by being a grain of wheat. But if it holds on to its graininess, then that value that it has stays with itself and dies with itself. Just like that wheat of grain, that grain of wheat. What does it mean for us that if we hold on to or hoard ourselves and we preserve ourselves, but we ultimately don't do what we're created or meant to do? I think that's the challenging question here, is what does it mean to paradoxically let go of what means to be ourselves in order that we become ourselves? Not that we deny ourselves in order to become the perfection of what God wants, but that we let go of the grip of ourselves is as the means of getting that. So if we allow our graininess to be transformed, others benefit, and we share that graininess beyond ourselves. Who here has ever had bread? Excellent. Who here has ever had whiskey? Okay. So what's interesting is that both with bread, the grain is the source of that nourishment. The very thing that we eat together as the body and blood of Christ is made from a grain of wheat. Also, the word whiskey is based on the Gaelic translation of aqua vitae, which is the name for the early sort of liqueurs that were made by monks. Things I learned from my colleague Steve Beale, who is also a priest and a whiskey maker. And it was from the beginnings of the grain of wheat dying and going dry and beginning to bud that they were able to bring the distillate out that could make this thing. And before whiskey was sort of a drink that was used all around, it was used for medicinal purposes and healing. It gave the water of life, if you will. So there's something in this crucible moment of the grain of wheat when it's reached full life on its stalk, that if it doesn't fall to the ground and open itself up to new life, it's sort of stopping its entire purpose in its circle of life. So that's where the paradox comes into play. Because if we allow our graininess to be transformed, where we let go, allow ourselves to take this leap of faith, if you will, and be transformed into this new life, not only are we still the grain that we were, but our graininess is not only preserved, but our graininess goes out into the world and makes more graininess in other ways. So, once again, I love the paradox of nature, and that how death and rebirth are integrally woven into God's creation as well as our story as followers of Christ. So if you retain your graininess by letting go of your graininess in order to become more grainy, what is our graininess? Like what are the benefits that you have? What are the unique gifts that you have to offer the world that God has given you that you are created to give, that if given would benefit the world, benefit Fremont, benefit St. Anne's? In other words, what makes you unique? And what, more importantly, makes you necessary? That's the graininess that each of us has. And each of us has slightly different graininess. And God has called each of us into that graininess that we're given in order to benefit one another. There's nothing better than a good mixed wheat, whole wheat bread that's been baked in natural ways and the incredible deliciousness and the richness that it brings. We need that intersection of those different grains to make that bread as tasty as it is. And again, if Christ is the bread of life, then we are Christ's body, and we eat Christ's body and bread. It's very interwoven, this stuff. That's where we are called to allow ourselves to be brought forward into the world to do things for it. Now, the other question is, what is the fruit that letting go of said graininess that the world would benefit from? What about you needs sharing? What if you're someone who's afraid to share that graininess with other people? Has anyone ever been afraid to let yourself kind of stick your neck out and really show the world who you are? Yeah, I think that's a healthy fear. I think that anyone who doesn't have that fear is either really, really, really confident or has not been slapped down by life or rejected or shut down for what you have to offer. That's another challenge that graininess brings for us, is it requires a bit of courage. So what might you be afraid to let go of, or let go of control of? I'm looking at myself in the mirror when I say that. That if God had permission to utilize from you, would bring so much more grace than is currently the case. If you hold on to your graininess still exists. Your value still exists. But what that value, what that core being, what your unique gifts, what your necessity would bring to the world is withheld from the world. And it actually ultimately stifles the quality of life and quality of graininess that you have if you don't give that away. So the old cliche, the more you give, the more you receive. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But in this case, it's absolutely true. But I think the question, if I were to put more philosophical terminology on it, is what sort of eternal graininess can we get if we let go of the temporal graininess? If we let go of our finite experience into the infinite, what is God going to bring from that? And what is the ultimate good? What is the ultimate good that allowing yourself to be reborn, to be reformed from finite concern would bring to the world? So those are the big questions and the summation of graininess. So we are about to approach the moment where we walk with Christ, where he, in the fullest sense, literally allows himself to die. And yet we also know that through that death, he passes through death and comes into new life. And not only is it new life, but it's abundant life that goes out into the world in a way that it never would have if that had not happened. Now, I'm not saying that we need to allow ourselves to be executed or to be killed for that to work. But the big question, the big crux of what is being asked of us is, what are our gifts that make us unique and necessary, that need to be let go of and allow God to take in so that we can grow and live and give more to others? What are the needs that St. Anne's has that you are necessary for? And if you're doing your graininess work, great. If you're not, that's okay. Let's see where we can get that going so that we can be grains of wheat that fall forward and find more life through the paradox of graininess. Amen.